My friends Ben and Jen Rohde of the Rohde Institute recently did a channeling about the Mandela effect. I was able to get clearance to share it with all of you. As always, you can have discernment, take what works for you, leave behind what does not. There was a lot that was channeled by Jen that really made a lot of sense to me. Thank you, Ben and Jen Rohde from the Rohde Institute, for allowing us to share this with all of you.
So,
We are live.
yeah, okay. We want you to understand that nothing in your world, in your physical world that you're sensing, that you're perceiving, is physical. It is every single thing that you perceive, you are translating through various translation systems. You're literally translating and projecting through your thoughts, your sound, the sounds you think you're hearing, the thoughts you think you're even the thoughts you think you're thinking, the sounds you think you're hearing, um, the things you think you see are not what you think you're seeing, are not what you're actually seeing. So depending on the frequency of your each of your individual wavelengths, you can all be looking at the same thing but seeing something different. Now, because there's a collective agreement around certain things, many of you have agreed to hear certain things, to see certain things, but really it's a matter of perception. You've agreed to perceive certain things in a certain way. Everything is being translated from a higher dimension, and you are all translating, like your bodies are designed to translate various frequencies into your own perception of physical form. So what you're beginning to realize with the Mandela effect is that each of you are indeed living in your own worlds and your own dreams. And many of you are having a collectively co-created dream, which you are agreeing on. So we want to draw your attention even to the chartreuse color, which some of you say is blue, and some of you say is magenta, and some of you say is red, and some of you say is green. But what we want to even draw your attention to beyond that is that one person's red is another person's green, is another person's blue. It really can be that extreme of differences in the way that you're perceiving and then transmitting your reality. So, for instance, if you look at the way that the physical eyes function in the body, they perceive something and then everything is translation. Everything is translation. So nothing is the way that you think it is. It's all something that you're translating. So two of you could be watching the same thing at the same time, but you're seeing and hearing and perceiving two different things, or three different things, or 10 different things. That's what that's what the collective consciousness is beginning to become more and more and more and more aware of. So you could think of it as layers of multidimensionality all layered together. In other words, each of you is carrying your own individual dream. Each of you is carrying your own individual dimension. And a dimension of consciousness is nothing more than a different perception of consciousness. So if two of you happen to be perceiving the same thing at the same time, it's simply because you're tuned into the same frequency. You are interpreting things in the same way, and you're having the same perception of the experience of what's being transmitted from a higher dimensional place. And it doesn't matter what it is. It can be a commercial. It can be anything. It can be anything in your world. It's all getting transmitted down from a higher. You have to realize that every single thing you see, hear, read, taste, touch, feel, everything that you're sensing does not exist in the way that you think it exists. It exists first in the higher dimensional realm as a thought block, as thought patterns, which your higher dimensional self then interprets down into this reality. So you're beginning to understand that every single one of you is experiencing different things, even when you're all in the same room. You're hearing different things. You're seeing different things. As the collective consciousness shifts, your memories shift, your thoughts shift, your experiences shift, something that you weren't able to perceive. So, for instance, we want to draw your attention to Star Wars and the what's his name?
Luke and your father.
No, the C-3PO, the gold. He's all gold, but then he's got a silver leg. That memory was a group memory that the collective, much of the collective was not able to perceive at the time. So it's representative of, it's a complex thought. It all represents something in your mind. So the collective was, depending on the collective consciousness, the collective perceives different things. So in the same way that they've studied the brains of gay men, and many gay men actually have the perception to perceive a wider variety of colors, because of, it has really to do with their level of consciousness. So this has to do with the collective level of consciousness is able to perceive more detail in form. In other words, like you could have something going on in the background. We also want to draw your attention to they're taking me all over the place right now, trying to like lead me. So just bear with me. We want to remind Jen and Ben of the video, the movie that they watched one day, that was of the magicians, and where there's distraction in the front, in the foreground, and because there's so much going on in the foreground, there can be things going on in the background that no one's noticing, and you have to actually watch the video 2 or 3 times, and they have to actually highlight what's going on in the background, because you'll completely miss it. Most people will completely miss it. It's like that. So because people's consciousness is shifting, people are beginning to perceive more things. But it's not as simple as like it was there or it wasn't there. You haven't really understood, because you haven't been understanding the basic way that your bodies perceive something. That your bodies are translation systems. That your body will translate one thing one way at one level of consciousness, and will translate something else another way at another level of consciousness. And it's really just an indicator that your level of consciousness is shifting. In other words, the way that you're perceiving the information that you're receiving from a higher dimensional realm, the collective is shifting. Many people are shifting the way that they are perceiving it and the way that they used to perceive things, and they're gauging things differently. Do you have any other questions?
So
complex.
So in the case of something that we remember, that just isn't there anymore, is it because it was never actually there?
It's still there, but you haven't understood the way that, this is a good question. It's still there. It still exists at that state of consciousness. So we've talked to you many times about how time is not real. It's a perspective. It's space-time. It's a perspective in the framework of time. So the held perspective in the framework of time is still true, but there are many different perspectives which are always being held on a variety of topics in different dimensions of consciousness, which even time runs differently. So it has to do with the way that your transmitters of information are transmitting the information. In other words, it's a sign from you, one aspect of yourself. It's a sign from one aspect of yourself, sending a sign or a symbol or a sign or a symbol or a thought block to another aspect of yourself, reminding yourself of how much you've changed, reminding yourself of the new perspective that you're holding. It's a block of information and thought that you have to understand that nothing is actually here, that the universe is thought. It's created out of thought, that nothing is physical. That's the first thing that you have to really understand, that nothing was ever there. It was never there in the first place, and it was there because you perceived it to be there. It's only there because you are perceiving it to be there. When your perception changes, it changes along with your perception, because it doesn't exist without you perceiving it. So there are different aspects of you in different dimensions or states of your consciousness which are sending you messages in this state and time, reminding yourself of how much you've changed in the way that you're now translating the information.
So if our unconscious minds can collectively, in a huge group of people,
yes,
change such significant things,
yes,
I feel like
this is the critical mass consciousness we've been sharing
yes,
with you
I feel
about.
like it's training wheels, knowing that we can change names and
Yes,
and little lines and stuff like that, and now we can start changing poverty,
yes,
violence,
yes,
war, the banking system.
Yes, that's correct, because it's all about the story that you tell,
So
and it's all about the way that you write it.
it's probably like training wheels. Like people are having a hard enough time trying to understand, the little things. No way. There's no way that he said, "No, I am your father." I remember him saying, like, people are losing their minds over the littlest things.
Yes, and we want you to lose your minds. We want you to lose your minds. We want you to lose your minds because we want you to understand that this is a dream. We want you to understand that that you're interpreting the information, and that the only thing that makes the information real, or you perceiving it as real in the physical realm, is your perception of it. We want you to come into better understanding with the fact that you really are creating your reality, and that when a critical mass of you begins to agree collectively on a different truth of your reality, that is exactly what you will create, and you will literally rewrite history. That is why history is constantly rewriting itself, because it's never been true, because the past is constantly changing and the future is constantly changing. There are thoughts that lead to thoughts that lead to thoughts, that are cause and effects, that the causes and effects go forwards and they go backwards. So causes and effects have to do with trains of thought that are repetitive trains of thought, and we are using train deliberately, as in we want you to visualize a train running on a track right now. So they're repetitive trains of thoughts, but the trains can take different courses. You're only where you are on the train of thought, and the train of thought from your viewpoint you can see so far into the future and you can see so far into the past, but it has to do with the cause and effect in the middle of the train, where you are in the now present moment, that even is constantly creating and recreating your past and your future and your past and your future. And as soon as the collective of you transform, really you're transmitting a different energy, because your framework of your structure. Here's the thing, there are blocks of thought that are coming into you, but your blocks of thought that come in to your receptors are still being translated through your framework. As your framework shifts, the way that it is translated shifts out into the world and what you perceive, so it's then mirrored back at you. So your system transmits a block of thought from a higher dimensional realm that is you, from you, and it transmits it down, then projects it out. It mirrors for you what you think you understand from a higher dimensional realm into this realm. Then it mirrors it back to you. Then you can decide. You have the choice if you decide that you want to see it that way or not. You can change the way that you see it. You can change the way that you can perceive it. And when you change your framework, the whole world changes. Literally, you'll rewrite your history and you'll rewrite your future. Your Bible will change. Your revelations will change. Your predictions about the future will change. Your Nostradamus will change. Everything will change because of the way you're perceiving it. When your framework changes, your understanding changes, everything changes. All that previous beings were doing, your prophets, they were looking at the natural causes and effects of the basic framework of the collective consciousness of the time. And they were reading into the future from that particular, you could call it timeline, but you could also call it wavelength of consciousness. You could also call it dimension of consciousness. It doesn't matter. There are different ways for you to view this, different perspectives, but We actually want to start simplifying it for you. You're interpreting the information that you're getting in, and because of their framework and their interpretation, their natural causes and effects, they were predicting what was most likely to occur in the future. But you can change the past from where you are now just as easily as they were rewriting the future from where they were, from their perspective of consciousness. They were predicting the future. You can also predict the past from your new, whoever holds the most solid framework in the consciousness rewrites all of everything. You see, whoever's most lucid in the dream of life rewrites everything. Everything's being rewritten over and over and over and over again. Whoever's holding the most solid position, whoever's holding the strongest thought, whoever is balling up the energy of source in them, then has the power to create the reality, not that just for themselves, but for the world at large. And it's constantly being changed. It's constantly being recreated. The energy's constantly shifting from person to person to person. This is why Osho said, I leave you with my dream. He was one of the ones that was holding a great collective consciousness. Christ was he was one of the ones holding a great collective consciousness for the masses. When he left, everyone felt it. It's all being rewritten over and over and over again. It's all being retold over and over and over again from different perspectives. This is why the Native Americans say, and Jen likes this a lot, they say, I don't know if it happened this way or not, but I know the story to be true, because the essence of what is true always remains the same. But the story will change, the language will change, the words will change, the colors will change, even the orders will change. The essence
what needs to be heard now.
Yes. According to what needs to be heard now for the perception, for the ultimate expansion of the consciousness of the whole. What needs to be perceived in order for the collective consciousness to expand will shift. The essence of what is true will always remain the same. It never changes on a higher dimensional realm. It's constantly in flux. Every single time you blink, it changes. Every single time you breathe in and out, it changes. Every single time you go to sleep and you wake up, it changes. Your world is constantly changing because your perceptions are constantly changing. You're trying to catch up with yourselves. The only way to really do it is to stay present in the moment. Your memories aren't real in the way that you think of them being real. They're thought blocks of memory which you're holding. We want you to align more with and remember more of your higher dimensional self, the thought blocks that your higher dimensional self is holding on to, because we want you to know that those pieces are eternal. What they're being transmitted into changes. Because you're in a human body holding a unique perspective. The higher dimensions don't change, but your perception of what is changes because of the way that you're transmitting and translating the information through your nose, through all of your senses, through your sight, through your sound, through your nose, through your smell, to your taste, all of it. Everything changes. This is even why food tastes change while you age. Everything changes because your perception changes. Children like sweet. Adults tend to like more bitter. Your tastes change. Your perceptions change. Your taste changes, your perceptions change. Part of you is sending a thought block to yourself in this now time to remind yourself of how much you've changed. To remind yourself that you're not the same person. To remind yourself that you're not living in the same world. But really we want to remind you that you're not living in the world at all. The world is living in you. And the world springs forth from your thought. And then it's mirrored back to you. And it's mirrored back to you. And it's mirrored back to you.
So, given that the collective has been changing simple things like the spelling of a name or the date of a death.
They've been changing much greater things too. Yes.
Mm-hmm. So, and they've been doing it without trying. Nobody.
Trying conscious we would say trying, consciously trying. Yes.
Right. Nobody sat. They didn't call together a group of people, sit down, do a seance, do a ceremony to change anything. Right. It just happens that people started noticing.
Yes.
And bringing other people's attention to it.
Yes.
So now
you're all like tuning forks. So as your consciousness is tuned to one another, and there's just showing me a visual right now, but it's like a tuning fork. So one person will start tuning to this new frequency, and they'll start vibrating at this new level, and they'll start seeing something new, and then like everybody else is joining. You'll see like a major group flock and start joining the bandwagon of it, and then they're all vibrating together, and then they're all perceiving things differently.
So you and I and the group of our friends and followers that are around us, we all want to change certain things.
Yes.
We want to change the money system. We want to change the health system. We want to change the education system.
Yes.
We want to change the government system. We want to change a lot of things.
Yes.
And so if we get a group of Mandela effect fanatics, believers, big enough, is there something, an actual physical thing that we can do to start bending our reality at will and changing these things with this group of first responders, or do we not need to?
That's what we want you to understand.
It's already done.
Right. So your concern is not trying to change everything, because everyone is in free will choice. Everyone is holding a unique perspective, and everyone's perspective is actually serving you even to come to your own new perspective. So if certain people weren't holding counter perspectives to yours, you wouldn't be able to do the work that you're doing here. So this is why we keep leading you to just create your own world. This is why we keep leading you to just not even really look at what's going on. And you can look at it long enough to say, no, I want something different. That's fine. But don't spend too much time in it, because you really are, each and every one of you really are creating your own reality. So all that you're doing is you're creating a new dream. All that you're doing is you're drawing new people into your dream who want to dream the same dream that you're in, who want to have, what a dream is a way, even when you're dreaming, even when you are actually dreaming, there is a higher dimensional thought. There are higher dimensional thoughts. Even the word thoughts is limiting for you. But we'll use the word thoughts because it's the closest thing that we can come to. Even when you're dreaming, there's a higher dimensional, we like block of thought or transmitted frequency. There's a frequency that is being carried that you are then disseminating, you're dispelling, it's dissolving down into your form, into symbols. Symbols, they're symbols, it's all symbolism, it's all archetypes for what's going on higher. So even when you dream, you're doing this, but what you haven't realized is that you're doing it all the time in this reality. All of you are. So what you want to do, and this is why the collective agreement in your, the collective agreement in your community that you're creating is so important, because each and every one of you has to have, yes, you're also going to live in your own worlds. No, you're not going to agree on absolutely everything. But in general, you have to agree on the same basic framework in order to co-create the same dream together. This is why you have to have rules, not because the rules are right or the rules are wrong. There's no right or wrong, but because each and every one of you has to have an agreement of, yes, this is the dream that I want to perceive. This is the reality that I am agreeing to perceive with you. Because if one of you says, yes, that's red, and the other one of you says, yes, that's blue, and you're both looking at the same thing, you're not in the same dream. So this is why the framework is very important for you in your community, because the framework creates, you're co-creating a new dream. And then others can choose to come in and out of your dream or not. Don't worry about the rest of the world. Really, we want you to stop worrying about the rest of the world. We want you just to create what you came here to create, and then others will show up who are vibrationally aligned with it and who want to have that experience. But you have to understand that everyone is having the exact experience that they're meant to have, that they're supposed to have, that they're aligned with having, even if it looks painful to you. It's all what they came here to do. So if your consciousness shifts into a different perception of reality, and other people can choose to be magnetized, and they can choose to experience it, then beautiful. But you don't need to worry about any of it. You don't need to worry about any of it. Rome will fall. It always does. It's meant to. It's by design. Rome is made to be built, and it is made to be destroyed. It always has been. It always will.
It's quite a game.
It's just a game. The game is, as you and Jen say, the game is what do you want? Do that. You don't worry about anybody else. Invite them in. Don't worry about it. Let them know what you're doing. Don't worry about it. You don't have to change everything. You didn't come here to change everything. You came here to have your experience.
So we've already touched on this several times, but what is the purpose of the Mandela effect?
Purpose is a curious word because it actually feels heavier than it needs to be. It's the Mandela effect isn't happening to you, it's happening through you, it's happening by you, you're creating it. And even more so, we could say than you're creating it is you're recalling it, or you're remembering it, or you're more connected with the different aspects of yourselves which are communicating with one another. So in other words, if you weren't remembering now from this perspective, if you weren't in more and more and more and more communication with your multidimensional selves, which by the way, you know, yourself when you were 5 is a different aspect of your multidimensional self. It might as well be a past life. There's no difference between yourself when you were 5 than yourself in linear time thousands of years ago. There's no, because time isn't real. So it's a symbol or a sign that you are in more and more and more communication with different aspects of yourselves in different dimensions or states of consciousness, that you are communicating with yourself. Because if you weren't communicating with these different parts of yourselves, you wouldn't be able to recall it or remember it differently. You would just think, well, it has always been that way. You literally wouldn't have the memory. So the fact that the memory isn't a memory is not a memory. A memory is a communication. It's a wormhole. Jen had this experience when she did that drug that I said, don't ever do again.
Salvia.
The salvia. Jen had this memory, yes, the realization it's a wormhole. So you're going through a different dimension of consciousness to communicate with yourself. It's not really a memory. There are no memories. But what you need to understand is that's why the memories can change too, because the different dimensions of consciousness can change. You're all affecting every single dimension of consciousness that you coexist in simultaneously. You are all learning together, and you are all affecting one another simultaneously. So you're communicating with different aspects, like they're showing you light. So it's like you've got a new thought, and then it creates more light, and then you're sending it to another aspect of yourself, and then they're sending it to another aspect of themselves, and then they're sending it to another aspect of themselves, and then it's driving back to you, and then it's like bouncing, it's like popcorn, back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. So all the realities are constantly changing together. It's all happening simultaneously. It's the best way for you to think about it. It's the most accurate way for you to be able to comprehend it from your limited perspective. So it's just an indication that you are in greater communication with the different aspects of yourself. And that the different aspects of yourself are also sending you messages. You're sending them messages. They're sending you messages. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Do you remember? It's as though you're saying to yourself, do you remember when we were perceiving things this way? Do you remember when we were translating? You see, Jen thinks she's a channel and she's translating, and she is, but she's been, what you don't understand is that each and every one of you is a channel, and you've been translating things your whole life from higher dimensional frequencies. You're just translating, most of you are translating in agreement. So when you hear, Luke, I am your father, that never happened in the way that you think it happened. That doesn't mean it didn't happen. It just means that enough of you were collectively agreeing on that you perceived and translated the higher dimensional transmission into Luke, I am your father. You all, enough of you collectively were perceiving it that way that you agreed upon it.
That it was actually created.
That it was created, but you don't understand the way creation works. Yes, it's not really created. It's a collective consciousness that's holding a thought for an extended period of time. It creates the perception of that in your physical reality. That's the way things are created. It's about you coming into understanding with the way that reality creation works. You're beginning to really understand yourselves as reality creators. You're beginning to understand that this is a dream that you're in. You're in a dream. It's a highly technologically advanced dream because you're highly complex creatures, but it's a dream. It's a dream. So your interpretation, your collective interpretation of what happened just shifted. What happened in a higher dimensional frequency, the thought block of Star Wars, the thought block of the transmission, the thought block of the story. It's not a story, it's a thought. It's a thought in the mind of God in the same way that each and every one of you is a thought in the mind of God. And every single thought in the mind of God is constantly transforming. It takes on a life of its own. As each and every one of you take on a life of your own, God has a thought about you and then births you through the thought, and then you begin to think for yourselves. So does everything. The movies that you watch, the books that you read, they have a life of their own, you see. That's why J.K. Rowling says, she talks to the characters and she lives with the characters and she breathes the characters and the characters are ever evolving because they are. Because she is a thought in the mind of God and her characters are a thought in the mind of her, but it all goes back to a thought in the mind of God. Every single thing that is a thought in the mind of God is constantly changing because it's ever evolving, because it's ever expanding, because the nature of the source or God or universal life force energy, the collective, is constantly evolving and changing. Everything is constantly evolving and changing. The only thing that's changing for you now is the way that you are perceiving the Mandela effect, is that you're beginning to have more and more communication with different dimensional aspects of yourselves. You could say that the veil is thinner. You're remembering more of your future and you're remembering more of your past. But it's not remember, is putting it back together. You're communicating with different parts of yourself. That's it. You're reminding yourselves. You're having communication with different aspects of yourself in different degrees of your reality, degrees of your separation.
Sounds just like Westworld. Okay. Is there anything else you need us to know?
We want you to know how powerful you are and that you're not, we don't want you to go into any fear around manipulation or fear around control. We want you to understand that it's all serving you. And we want you to understand that you do have the power to create your reality and that you've always had it. We want you to understand that the only reason you didn't perceive that you had it for a while was because you elected to. We want to remind you that there are no limitations on your experience except for the ones that you have imposed on yourself. And even those limitations are serving you and helping your advancement. Limitation is an interesting word because it sounds constrictive, it sounds fear-based, it sounds, to many of you, it doesn't sound positive, but it really can be. Because it is the very limitation, the framework that allows you to experience your reality in the way that you are. It's the very limitation. So you're expanding beyond many of the previous limitations that you had because you're ready to. But don't get stuck in the idea that the limitation is bad or creating suffering. That's simply not true. That's simply not true. That's simply never been true. That's a misperception. It's a division from your higher self. It's a division. When the more linked that you become with your higher self, the more that you remember who you are, the more that you're going to remember all the choices that you made and why you made them. And yes, it can feel like a maze, and yes, it can feel confusing, but you chose all of it. You chose all of it, and it's all serving. There's nothing happening that isn't supposed to be happening. And there is no real limitation here. There's no, you can create anything you want. No one's holding you back. You are and have always been the creator of your reality. If you want to create a villain in your reality, you can create that. If you want to create a nightmare in your reality, you can create that. But no one's dreaming your dream but you. You can observe other people's dreams, but they're their dreams. They're not your dreams. They don't belong to you. They don't belong to you. Other people's nightmares are their nightmares. They're creating them too. No one's imposing anyone's will on anyone else. You're all free. You're all sovereign. You're all sovereign beings, having whatever experiences you're choosing to experience, consciously or unconsciously. The thing is, the higher self is always consciously choosing. The only difference between conscious and unconscious choice in this reality is that the previously unconscious or asleep self begins to remember what the higher self already chose for it. That's all. The higher self is always choosing. The higher self is always in control. The higher self always knows what's happening. The higher self is constantly expanding. The higher self is constantly adjusting and adapting to what is happening and occurring for the lower self. But there's always a connection. Everything is always playing out exactly the way it's supposed to be. Nothing's happening by chance. Not alone. Do you have any other questions?
Is there anything you want to leave us with?
We want to free you from some of the binds that you created for yourself, which comes from some of the previously limited framework, which is no longer serving you. Ben, you might want to lay down. We want to help you open up your mind. We want to help you open up your thoughts. We want to free you from all the restrictions you placed on yourself as they were serving but are no longer serving you. We are grounding you down and linking you in with the iron core crystal of the earth as you receive it. Good. Grounding you down and in. Emancipation from previous reality constructs. Of limitation. We are realigning your frequency, raising the vibratory field and the light patterns, allowing you to be more clear transmitters of the information we are sending you and you are sending back to us. We want you to understand that this communication, this dialogue is a dialogue. It is a back and forth, back and forth, back and forth process. And you are benefiting us as much as we are benefiting you. You are helping us as much as we are helping you. We want you to receive our help, our service. You are freeing yourselves from guilt, from shame, from blame, from misunderstanding, from confusion, from doubt, from fear. It is in this liberation that you begin to experience the full myriad of your freedom in this realm. The previous limitations that you chose to place on yourself was placed here to keep you here. holding this primary perspective for the whole. And we want you to know that your time holding that perspective is no longer needed. You could say that you're graduating, moving forward in time and space, lightening your frequency, lightening your energy, lightening your vibration, freeing up your molecules to realign and rewire your system, letting yourself float freely now. Reminding you that your mind is creating everything that you see, everything that you perceive, everything that you know. You don't know what you think you know. When you think you know something, you create it that way. We want you to relax your mind. And you feel yourself transmitting the violet flame, violet frequency, violet light, golden light, white light, cleansing and purifying, raising your vibration.